Black. So I want to say to everyone, thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to be talking about this topic. I want to say to everyone, I appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe, and share this channel and this video. For more videos, please visit my YouTube channel, dopeblacktherapist.com. If you're looking for a dope black therapist, a trauma therapist, a restorative yoga therapist, a meditation person, someone who does Reiki, someone who does EMDR, IFS. Think about your girl. Visit me at CandiceDickens.com. Let's get to it. This past July, I had the pleasure of going to the Essence Musical Festival. And you know how they say in Vegas, right? That happens in Essence stays in Essence, except for this part. I was in the tent where they had all the information. They had the acts, the Superdome, and they had the tent, the information, the acts. They had holistic providers, health providers. It was amazing, and I discovered a section called the social advocacy section. And I went there and I learned about different organizations that advocated for the rights of others, for the rights of indigenous populations have been traditionally marginalized, African Americans, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, indigenous people, people from Asian descent. I think I already said that. I'm trying to think of who else. There's so many of us that have been oppressed and marginalized throughout history. But I love the fact that I found out all these great organizations that really do a lot of great advocacy work. And then I found about some other things that were happening, such as cancel culture. I mean, I'm thinking about cancel culture. I'm thinking about like Will Smith, the famous slap, right? And where he hit Chris Rock. And because of that, a lot of sponsors decided to stop sponsoring him. People were complaining about him. Or I thought about R. Kelly, right? Mute R. Kelly, canceling R. Kelly. And I remember thinking, wow, you cancel something that you don't like. And I remember thinking, okay, cancel R. Kelly. He's violating women and girls, because some of them hadn't developed to become women. Some were girls who were still teenagers. So that made sense, right? You're canceling him because he's a violator, he's a predator. Made sense. Will Smith, you're canceling him because he hit another person of color in a public forum, and by hitting him and then chastising him, he's dehumanizing him, right? He's ridiculing him, and this man's only doing his job, and his job is as an entertainer. He's a comedian, right? He's a commentator. He was the host of the show. So I was like, okay, it makes sense, but then to not just punish him from getting another Oscar ever again, but then to cancel him and then try to cancel his family, which means her show goes away, which means the book sales drop, which is an erasure of the people because society had decided that they weren't good people anymore. They weren't the face of America, right? So the similar treatment that we had for people who were pedophiles, I'm noticing that there's a similar kind of behavior of anyone who society feels is not good, not proper, or that should be punished. And then I started noticing something that disturbed me is that people were canceling things that looked like they were connected to people of color. And I noticed that there was this trend. I didn't see a lot of canceling people who didn't have Afrocentric or Asian descent ancestry. I saw most people who were canceled were people who looked like me or who are a person of color. And that started concerning me. So going back to the essence, right? I'm learning about all these great organizations. And then I run across this organization that's offering free books. I love books. I don't care whether I get them from Amazon, from Goodwill, from bookstore, the library. I love books. I listen to audibles. I love paper books so I can write notes in it. I love books. And they had talked about, if you sign this protest against people canceling books in the school system, you can get a free book. You can get one of the books that have been banned. And I was like, oh my God, what kind of books are these? These must be like sexual books, like books that I want to read. But no, but I thought there were some scandalous books. But the book that was canceled was a book about Ruby Bridge. Ruby Bridge is the little girl that integrated the school system in the elementary level, right? Remember, there was Ruby Bridge. She was the only child in that school system. at a school by herself, and then there were teenagers. And what they canceled was Ruby Bridges' This Is Your Time. And it's a small book, maybe about 17, 20 pages. And in the book, you see pictures of people working together. You see pictures of Ruby, and you get to see her experience. And there's some Afrocentric pictures. And I was dialoguing with them, and I was like, well, why did they cancel this? And they said, well, they're canceling anything that made people feel uncomfortable. That was part of the critical race theory thing. And I said, well, so they're canceling anything that told the truth about what happened to this little girl. Right? When you're a little girl hearing about Ruby Bridge or seeing a movie about her or a cartoon about her, you're thinking, wow, look at her. Or you see the poster, and all you see is her walking, right? With her head up high in a beautiful white dress. You're like, wow, look at her. She's so cute and so brave, right? It never occurs to you that that behind her and in front of her are police escorts. And it doesn't occur to you that on the side of her and back of her, around her, are people who are trying to spit at her, people who are hurling horrible things about a little girl, and what her whole day is like being isolated because no one wants to sit with her because she's been canceled. She was not asked to come to this school. Her father decided that he wanted her to have the same rights as other people, and he wanted his daughter to go to this school. It was his decision, right? He decided that I wanted my child to have the privileges that I didn't have, the opportunities that I didn't have. So he put this little girl, who is this little girl, in a school that the narrative is, what a brave child. You see the picture. But the story that the woman tells about the experience was how she was not wanted. She was isolated. No one played with her. That she went from being very connected in a school system to being very disconnected at a school where no one of her friends were at. There was no one that looked like her who was a teacher. There was a support system. No one wanted her there. She was there because the law said she could be there. So people canceled this book because it talked about critical race theory. And for people who don't know what critical race theory is, it's a theory that really talks about how racism has impacted different peoples of communities of color, and talks about how racism is about power and privilege, right? And it comes to oppress people and keep people enslaved or keeps people at a level where they can't have the same equal rights as other people. They don't have access to wealth, access to power because of the discrimination that goes all the way back to slavery or goes all the way back to wherever your people come from of color. So this book talked about a truth that made people uncomfortable, made children uncomfortable, right? Because as Kenneth Hardy said, people don't want their children to be uncomfortable. Even though this little girl was uncomfortable, that they canceled it because it made them uncomfortable to hear the truth about how she was not allowed to go to the school in the beginning. And then when she was there, how it was such a horrible experience for her, that people weren't always connected with her, that she was very lonely, and that there were some people who were very sympathetic, but many people were not. So they canceled the book. So that and other books were taken out. Any book that talked about racism or slavery or anything that talked about anything that gave younger children who were non-African American, white children, a glimpse into what it was like, what the experience was like from the perspective of an African American, or they gave a different narrative about what the history was like and gave a glimpse of what inequity looks like, right? Black Wall Street gave a glimpse of what discrimination looked like, right? Anything that did that made people uncomfortable got canceled. So it's interesting that cancel culture has now become the thing where people say, if you make a mistake, you're going to get canceled. I don't want to say the wrong thing like Kevin Hart because I'm going to get canceled, right? So he says something in his 20s, when we're not fully finished, because in your 20s, you're still not you. You're not your adult self. You're an adult, looking adult, but you're not fully adult. Your brain's not fully finished until you're 26, 27. So he said something when he was 25, 26, when he wasn't quite finished. This was a young man who prior to 20s are adolescenthood. So he's in between adolescenthood and 30-year-old self, right? Young man who had said something during a time in which he was still trying to figure himself out and his position in the world. But because he had said something that was inappropriate And I don't defend when people say things that are inappropriate or that are discriminatory or that are biased. I don't defend that. But I do understand within the context of, wow, this is a young man. I'm looking at the culture, I'm looking at the age, I'm looking at all of those things. So if I fast forward to his 40s, 20 years later, he gets canceled from the Grammys. I think it was the Grammys or the Oscars. I think it was no, it was the Oscars because of what he said that was offensive 20 years ago. That could not be forgiven. Someone took Chris Brown, right, gets canceled because of something that he did, right, 15 years ago that stops him from being at a Super Bowl as a performer. Because society has deemed that once you make a mistake and you're a person of color, you don't get forgiven. It's like slavery. Once you're born into slavery, once you're taken into slavery, right? You don't get to have the freedom. It gets used against you, and it becomes like a heavy chain around your neck where you don't get permission to breathe, you don't get permission to be forgiven, you don't get permission to make amends or atonement for it, right? It gets to be like a stain on you. And I think the person who has been canceled that's really a great example of what it looks like to be stained is Lena Horne. And for those of people who are over 40, you may know Lena Horne, or over 45, you may know Lena Horne from her music. For me, Lena Horne came into my life through pictures, especially when she was in The Wiz, right? And she had that big white thing with stars around her, at least babies, brown babies, you know, saying you far from the start. You didn't, well, whatever. But she was beautiful. But for 7 years, she was canceled because she supported the civil rights movement. She marched with Martin Luther King. And the narrative is that everyone loved him. Everyone did not love Martin Luther King, right? This was a man who was stabbed. This was a man who was harassed. This is a man who had death threats consistently. But if I watch the movies, everyone loved him. But that is the narrative that gets created. But the reality of it is that people are very angry that he was trying to change history. He was changing the systemic order. He was asking for something that had never been done, which is for people to get an opportunity to be successful, to have the basic rights as everyone else, right? To not be discriminated because of the color of their skin, because of their sexuality, because of their social status. That this was a man who was advocating for justice, not just for us, for everyone who's ever been marginalized. But because she was supporting him and she was supporting Paul Robeson, who was a famous actor and opera singer and an activist in his own right, she was banned for 7 years and could not perform,
Unknown
could
caller.
not sing. Why does my phone keep going off whenever I am on my YouTube thing? Stop that. So she couldn't sing for 7 years, couldn't perform because people saw her as a communist or a bad person. But there are a lot of people who got canceled. So canceling culture doesn't begin with Chris Brown. It doesn't begin with Will Smith. And it doesn't begin with Lena Horne. Cancel culture is when people pick and choose of power who is acceptable and who's not acceptable, right? And it was African American people say, people cancel culture on people who are my complexion. People cancel culture on people who who are less educated. People cancel culture on people who they think um, are deviants, social deviants, because they're married out of wedlock, or because they have a criminal background, or because they don't speak the King's English very well. Right? They pick and choose, and they are the people who have privilege. And most people who look like me don't have full access to privilege. There are some because whenever I say that, people say, "Well, look at Jay Z." There aren't a million Jay Z's in the world, right? There are some, but there are not a million of them, and there aren't a million Oprahs. And I think that's what Taraji P. Henson was saying. She said, "I'm speaking and about the math, not math thing, because I'm working so hard, and I'm not getting the pay that I deserve." And that goes back to inequity, right? Differential treatment, not based upon skill level, but based upon oppression and discrimination and racism. And the fear that people had for her, and people heard in her voice was, "I'm going to get canceled." Because when you see this woman get mad and then you realize, whoa, there's fear in her face, that she realized that she's going to uncharted territory, and she's talking about a situation of power and powerlessness. She's talking about being powerless to help open the door for other women of color, right? Other people of different genders, and being powerless to open a door for her. And that she's hit the ceiling. And that's what we talk about when we talk about, wow, when there is fear, and the fear is, I'm going to be erased because I said the wrong thing, I did the wrong thing, then the standard becomes perfection. And if I can't be perfect, then I must be the opposite of that, which is failure. And if I'm a failure, then what happens is I go away. I get canceled. I become like Will Smith. He used to be all over the place, YouTube making videos, and then he gets canceled. So if you're like a Jonathan Majors and you have an altercation or someone's attacking you and you attack them or you make one mistake, you get canceled. So he goes from being the victim to being the villain again because he argued with the person after the person had accused him of abusing her and it was shown that he hadn't abused her. But because there was that contact, cancel culture, there's all these contracts. When I look at people who I love who are binary or who identify as LGBTQ plus, and they'll say, it bothers me every time I hear this Diddy thing because it's like they are shaming my culture. They're identifying all of these men of color, right? And they're adding shame to be to loving someone who's same sex or same gender. And they'll say, where's the shame at in loving someone who I choose, right, to love, who I choose to marry. But what happens is that every other day, people are trying to out people, and it's almost like canceling culture of the LGBTQ plus when they've made so much progress. So then it's not a good thing to be who they are, right? It's a good thing to use the pronouns, but it's not a good thing to be identified um, as cisgender or non-binary, right, or transgender. It's good when you hear it, but it's not good in reality. And that's the thing about it. So when they're saying things about Diddy and other people like, oh, he's with men, he's with men, there's nothing wrong with being with men. Or women are with women. There's nothing wrong with that. If you identify as a woman, there's nothing wrong with being with someone who also identifies as being female. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with this is when you decide to shame people and you cancel them out. You cancel their value out and you demonize it and you demonize them. There's something wrong when you see someone who's made a mistake or who's standing up for themselves and you cancel them because you didn't approve of it and use power and privilege to punish them and to shame them and erase them. But most people who are not being canceled do not look like me. Most people who are being canceled look like me, look like my sons, look like my husband, look like my brothers and my cousins. So I want you to really think about when you hear cancel culture. What does that mean for you? Do you participate in it? Do you participate in shaming people, blaming people? Right? Do you use your power to mute people? And are you aware, like as Cat Williams said, are you aware of how your own position of privilege, right? Because if I'm righteous, I can be privileged. And my own position of privilege sometimes is used to cancel other people, to call them out, to humiliate them. Right? Am I canceling them because I want people to see them as I see them, and I want them to go away? Or am I in a business of during Black History Month of living up my shirt says Black is beautiful. People are beautiful. Am I in the business of not canceling but creating, not canceling but uplifting, not canceling but making space for forgiveness, not canceling but making space for humanistic experiences where I see the humanness in you, right? And I reach out towards that human part and I give you an opportunity to do a reset part, especially if you've not done harm intentionally. And if you have done harm and if you've made amends for it, I create space for forgiveness within that humanistic experience. So I just want you to think about that. And really, the next time you tune in and you get to hear someone say something such as, oh my God, this person's horrible, let's cancel them. What does that mean? And what would it be like if you were canceled? Someone you love was canceled and they weren't forgiven and they weren't given an opportunity to grow. Because I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60, you get an opportunity to grow. Grow up. Grow within. Grow out of whatever has been eating at you. But you get an opportunity to change and to grow. So enjoy Black History Month. Embrace yourself. Find the books that have been banned. Order the books. And give yourself permission to unplug from cancel culture and plug back into embracing culture. Please like and subscribe this video. I look forward to seeing you at the next time that we meet next week. Take care. But if you're looking for a therapist, call your girl, CandiceDickens.com, and see my other videos on Dope Black Therapists. Bye, everybody.